Okay, perhaps this maybe brings back some memories, a little different look. I wanted to try to throw some of this together before I left school, but it just didn't work out that way. After doing that bus route, got back and thought we were getting ready for tomorrow. So it's kind of late tonight trying to get this wrapped up, so we're ready to go for tomorrow. Hopefully, not miss a step or miss a beat in this case. So for those of you who are gone, we only did one slide, and we're talking about different types of generations. And what that would possibly mean is, we'll refer to this in just a moment. Like, for instance, we did this, okay? Your grandparents, that we say that is the parental generation. And we discussed this in class. And then your grandparents would have, I don't know, we'll say they had 3 kids. And these would possibly be your parents then. Okay? And then, of course, if this is one of your parents, well, then that would be your aunt and uncle, for instance. So this is your parental generation. This is your first or F1 generation. And then from another family, from their grandparents that had another set of parents that then married, decided to have kids, well, then that's where you would come from. Okay? So then, anytime your parents have kids, well, then that would be you. You are part of the F2 or F or the filial, second filial generation. Okay? And in short, that's basically what we dealt with for those of you who were gone yesterday. Now that hopefully helped a little bit to try to explain that. I tried to think of something off the top of my head that would help. Hopefully make sense. All right. So recessive and dominant traits. That's what we see up here. Anytime you see a capital letter, that's going to be a dominant trait. So in completely dominant crosses, anytime you see a capital T, a plant's going to be tall. Anytime you see a capital yellow, that's the dominant capital yellow. You see a capital Y, the pea color will be yellow in a pea plant. Or in this case, this is more so of a human condition. The normal dominant trait for people is having normal blood. But if there's 2 recessive traits present, then we call that disorder called sickle cell anemia. And we'll spend a little bit of time on here to make some sense of this. Okay, so capital letters are dominant traits. Lowercase letters, that's why we got them dashes over the top. We know that those are recessive traits. I'm going to kind of follow along with that what's on a PowerPoint. I'm looking at a different computer at the same time. So keep in mind, the only way that a short plant can be expressed is if both alleles or both letters are lowercase t's. The only way a green pea plant can be expressed is if 2 lowercase y's are present. In this case, the only way someone is actually diagnosed for sickle cell anemia is if both of the S's, in this case, or alleles or genes, are a lowercase letter. That's the recessive trait. Okay? Then on this last slide, I see, I don't know if that's actually on your paper, but I'm looking at our slide. It just says the genotype and phenotype. And why don't I go ahead and write this in? That way, hopefully, it'll make more sense. So you're going to want to find a place to write this. Okay? This is part of section 9.2. So we got genotype and phenotype. Okay, and it says a genotype. I'm afraid you're not going to be able to see that color. So we'll go back to this one. Okay, so genotype is as follows. Refers to the organism's genetic makeup. Organisms, genetic makeup. That's what a genotype is. And a phenotype is what you actually see or observe. we're talking about in this section. So therefore, a phenotype, and that's you're actually observing or what's actually being expressed. Author goes on to say, refers to an organism's physical appearance. Okay, what you're actually seeing, the physical appearance. Green pea plants, short pea plants. Okay, in this case, taking a blood sample and seeing sickle cells inside of someone's blood. Okay, so a phenotype, we're going to say refers to an organism's physical appearance. So we'll just say an organism's physical appearance. And finally, we'll want to wrap up with what it says homozygous. Okay, homozygous is this, which would mean when both alleles are the same. Okay? Both alleles are the same. That's the simplest way to define that. Okay, so for instance, two capital T's. Both alleles are the same. Two capital S's. Both alleles are the same. It could also be two lowercase t's. Those are recessive traits, but those are also homozygous because both alleles are the same. That's all you're referring to when you're saying homozygous, is that both alleles for a trait are the same. Either both capital or both lowercase. Okay? And after now, heterozygous then is what we meant by a hybrid. For those of you who were in class actually today, because it's a little later here at night, I almost refer to that as yesterday. But what we mean by heterozygous, the author says alleles of a trait are different. Okay, so heterozygous. Okay, saying alleles for a trait are different. Both alleles for a trait are different. So you can pick any one of these traits. Blood typing, plant height, pea plant color. Those are all different types of traits. Each individual letter then is an allele. That's what we're talking about when we're referring to these terms alleles. In this case, for the trait of plant height, if both alleles are capital T, that's what we mean by homozygous dominant. This is the dominant trait. Both are capital T's. In this case, the plant will be tall because both alleles are present. It's being expressed as being a tall pea plant. And we could also have two capital Y's. That's also homozygous. But heterozygous is a little different. Both alleles for a trait, okay, pea plant color, are different. So rather than having two capital Y's, you would have a capital Y and a lowercase y. So both alleles for a trait, in this case, pea plant color, are different. Because if we had two lowercase y's, well then we've got, again, homozygous recessive, just like this. So for this trait of pea plant color, if it's heterozygous, you have to have one one capital and one lowercase. That's why I think it's kind of significant, or will help you out in the long run, if you put that little line over the top. And we went through that really quick, but again, I think the more exposure that you have in this, the better off we'll be. Okay, let's just do an example one. I think that would perhaps make the most sense in something that we've talked about before, is when someone's like a carrier. And what we mean by that is and I can use black color. Okay. Here's someone with normal blood is homozygous dominant for their blood type. So we're referring to this trait right here. Here are our two alleles. Capital S for normal blood. So we know we've got normal blood because we're saying that here. And it's homozygous dominant. That's going to be important here in just a moment as well. Is crossed, okay? In other words, with another parent, if the offspring, let's say the dad is homozygous dominant, is crossed with the mom, someone that is heterozygous for blood. Okay? What are the results? Okay? So the first thing to do, just like in physical science, if you remember parts of that, once you've written everything you know down, hopefully things start to fall into place. So we got to find and make a key first. Okay? So we're talking about this trait right here. So here's our key. If someone with normal blood is homozygous dominant, okay? So there's that term homozygous, and if this is the dominant trait, I want you to think about what two letters would you be looking at if it's homozygous dominant. Okay? If you said two capital S's, that would be correct. Okay? Because it's saying it's homozygous, so both alleles are the same, and it means since they're the same, it's also the dominant one. So it has to be this trait. This is the capital letter. Two capital S's is crossed with the mom, for instance, that is heterozygous for blood, which means then heterozygous then means one of each allele. So what two letters would that be? So think about that for a moment. Okay? If you had put a capital S and a lowercase s, you would be correct because again, heterozygous means you have one of each allele. So you have a capital and a lowercase blood. So what it's asking for, well, what are the results? Well, what we do with that, put that into this table, or that Punnett square. Okay, so on the left of this cross, put over here, and then what's on the right, we put on top. So then notice, it doesn't matter how big or how small you write these, we know that that's a capital letter, even though it looks like it's the same size, but as long as you put that little line over the top, we know that that's the recessive trait. Because it's heterozygous, again, you have both alleles, you have a dominant and a recessive trait. So therefore, in this cross, we've got two capital S's, two capital S's, capital lowercase s, and then a capital and a lowercase s. So this gives you your genotype. This is its genetic makeup. Okay? So in this cross, the genotype, we've got big S, big S, big S, and big S. And we've got two of those. Big S and big S. Sometimes when we get to these 4x4 crosses or squares, those get to be a little more tricky. What you might want to do is put a little zigzag squiggly line in there. That way you know you won't do the same square twice. So now we've accounted for two of them. We've also got two big S, and little s. So, are any offspring going to have sickle cell anemia? The answer is no. Because in order to have that disorder, both alleles have to be lowercase. So what happens is this is what we call a 50% chance of these offspring. This is the parental generation. This is the filial one or F1 generation. So this outcome, maybe having a cross with another individual, and that will be the second filial generation or F2. So what we see happening then is someone could possibly be a carrier. That would mean they may have some sickle cells, but they're not affected by this disorder. And that's what we mean by someone is a carrier. That means they can pass it on. Okay? So to make sense of this, we've talked to people or used an example in class about when someone has siblings who have blue eyes when actual we thought we had brown eyes. So what that means then, go ahead and erase this. If you need to go back to see the terminology, you can do that. So what happens, okay, is if two parents have brown eyes, okay, we're just going to say capital B is brown, lowercase b then is blue. Okay? So what happens is then both parents must be heterozygous for that trait. And this is why. Because if one parent is homozygous dominant, okay, big B and big B, and someone may be heterozygous for blue eye color, that's going to be a brown-eyed outcome. That's a brown-eyed outcome. That's a brown-eyed outcome. And that's a brown-eyed outcome. Both parents have got brown eyes. All offspring also have brown eyes. So we explain this by saying, well, both of them must have that recessive trait. It's just not being expressed. So what that means, both parents were heterozygous. That's a lowercase b. The only thing that's going to change is those two alleles right there. Big B, little b. Now that we've got two little b's here, both recessive traits, there's our blue eye color. So that's why it's not very common to only have blue-eyed kids if the parents have brown eyes. Because typically, you just say 25% of the time when both parents have brown eyes, but they have the blue-eye trait that they can pass on. That's why there's usually maybe just one or two, depending upon how many brothers or sisters that you actually have. That's the only way you can explain that having blue eyes occurs is that both mom and dad had the blue eye trait. It just wasn't being expressed because they were heterozygous rather than homozygous. I see I'm about at 18 minutes. I think that's probably about enough.